We will begin by creating the chair's seat base. Scale the default cube along the z-axis. To zoom in on the selected object, you can use the mouse wheel or the dot on the numpad keyboard. Before adding more shape to our base, create a loop cut in the middle of the object and remove half of it in X-ray mode to make it easier to select faces. Next, add a mirror modifier, and make sure that clipping is checked because this will prevent vertices from moving through the mirror plane. Now, we are ready to start shaping the base. While still in X-ray mode, I will select the middle vertices and start scaling them from the top view to get a better perspective of the applied changes. Next, I will add 2 more loop cuts and perform the same scaling on each. To make the base more interesting, I will make 2 additional changes. First, to its corners by simply selecting them and using the Ctrl+B shortcut to bevel them. Second, to the side of the base. I will add 2 loop cuts, and with only one of the newly added loop cuts selected in the top view, I will scale it outwards. Now we can go back to the solid view, and before moving on to the legs of the chair, I will enable the cavity inside the shading properties. This will highlight ridges and valleys in the scene geometry, giving a better visual of the model inside the solid view. We will create the leg of the chair while using the cylinder. 32 vertices are way too many. It's always better to start modeling low poly and with time slowly improve the complexity of your object. Scale and position the cylinder roughly close to the side and just under the chair base. Inside the side view, we will perform many scaling, adding new loop cuts and extruding. Follow along and feel free to experiment and create your own shapes of the chair leg. Now, we will add a bit more detail to this part of the mesh. First, select the loop of faces. After that, press the I key twice to inset each face individually. Next, move your mouse to decide how big you want the inset to be, and confirm it with a left click. You can always adjust the thickness and other settings inside the inset faces settings, so don't worry about trying to get the perfect measurements manually. Once that is done, extrude the inset faces and scale them along normals. Now, I will perform a scaling adjustment on the upper part of the leg and then move on to the bottom of the leg, including its hood and wheel. Select the bottom face, duplicate it with Shift+D, and separate it from the mesh using the P key and choose Selection. This separated face will become the hood of our wheel that we'll be working on. To edit this newly duplicated and separated mesh, switch to Object Mode with the Tab key. Before re-entering Edit Mode for better organization, rename all the objects inside the outliner. Once that is done, enter the Edit Mode for the wheel hood. With the face selected, scale it a little bit more and extrude it by 1.810. Next, with the bottom and top loop selected, bevel it with Ctrl+B and increase the bevel segments using the mouse wheel or pressing 3 on your keyboard. We want the hood and the wheel to face the front of the chair, so switch to the front view with numpad 1 and rotate the entire hood by 22.5 degrees on the Z-axis. We want to position the wheel somewhat halfway inside the hood, which means we need to create some sort of tunnel shape inside it. Positioning the wheel in the current existing loops would make it look too thin. That's why we will create an additional horizontal loop, and after that, we'll delete all the middle faces below it. To make things easier and more efficient, let's delete half of the hood and add a mirror modifier. Currently, half deletion of the hood is not possible because we are missing the middle loop. Let's fix that by creating a loop at the front and back. Next, remove the entire top face, which not only requires division but also a bit of additional topology cleanup. After that is done, switch to X-ray mode, delete half of the hood, add a mirror modifier, and check the clipping. Now that this is done, we can take care of the top of the hood and close it properly. Ideally, for the best topology, we always want quads, so let's select 4 vertices and press F to fill and create a face. Select the next 2 vertices, and by pressing F again, we will automatically create and fill the space with another face. Let's perform a similar process on the inside of the hood. Similarly to before, after selecting only 2 vertices, continue pressing F until you reach the end. Next, we will add more shape to our wheel hood. Select the bottom face and use the Ctrl plus numpad plus 3 times to increase the selected area. Inside the side view, scale the selected faces. Add 2 more loop cuts and scale them slightly outwards. We will also add more shape to the inside of the hood by individually selecting 2 faces and moving them along the X-axis. Now, let's create a sort of bottom base that will go through the wheel. Create 2 more loop cuts inside the hood and extrude the middle bottom face along the X-axis. Before connecting the 2 endings, we need to do 2 things. First, straighten the ending face position by scaling on the X-axis to 0. Second, we want to remove the side face because leaving it will result in a mesh with an unwanted visible deformation in the middle. When that is done, switch to wireframe mode, select and connect all 4 vertices by moving them to the end along the X-axis. Thanks to mirror clipping being enabled, we can only move all vertices not further than the middle meeting point, so you don't need to be careful while trying to connect both ends. Go out from the isolation mode of the wheel hood and enter the edit mode of the chair leg. We will reuse a part of the already created mesh to create a wheel. Make sure you are in face select mode and select the middle face loop. Next, use the numpad plus twice to broaden the selection area. Duplicate it with Shift+D, rotate it by 90 degrees on the Y-axis, and separate it by selection using the P key. Now, go back to object mode, rename the wheel, and start working on it. Switch to the front view with numpad 1, move the wheel down on the Z-axis, and change its origin by right-clicking on the wheel and choosing Origin to Geometry. Before moving on to the next step, take a look at these short examples demonstrating why having the origin point in the middle of your object is crucial. Now, scale and place the wheel roughly halfway inside the created hood tunnel. Enter the edit mode of the wheel, switch to edge mode, and let's take care of the side of the wheel. Select the entire edge loop and press F to fill. Next, perform a few insets and extrusions to add more details. Instead of repeating the same work on the other side of the wheel, switch to isolation with / front view with numpad 1, and create an extra loop in the middle of the wheel. Afterward, delete the left side, and add the mirror modifier. Lastly, let's fix the topology on the side of the wheel. This correction can be performed even faster. Simply delete the face, and with the edge loop selected, go to Face and choose Grid Fill. And we are done with the front leg. Move all the parts of the front leg up on the Z-axis and proceed to create the back leg of the chair. Before you continue, make sure that the Curve Extra Objects add-on is enabled. The back leg should be slightly curved. Because of that, instead of using the cylinder this time, we will be adding and modifying the Bezier curve. After adding it, move it down on the Z-axis. Rotate it by 90 degrees on the Z-axis. Straighten it by scaling on the X-axis by 0, and rotate it one more time, this time 90 degrees on the X-axis. Switch to the top view with the numpad 7, and with the X-ray mode enabled, move the Bezier curve closer to the other corner of the chair base. Next, switch to the side view and start repositioning the points. To add an extra point between 2 points, select those 2 points, right-click on the curve, and choose Subdivide. When you are satisfied with the position and curve shape, go to the Object Data Properties of the curve. Inside the Geometry section, switch Bevel from Round to Profile and change the depth number. Before converting the curve to mesh, go out from the X-ray mode and have a look at the end of the back chair leg. There is a visible big hole that we can easily fill out with one checkbox. Go back to the Geometry section and check the Fill Caps box. To convert the curve to mesh, you need to be inside the object mode, right-click on the object, and choose Convert to Mesh. With both legs ready, let's mirror them on the other side of the chair base. First, apply the already added mirror modifiers on the wheel hood and wheel. When that is done to each part of the leg, add a new mirror modifier and choose the chair base as the mirror object. Before we move on to the frame of the chair, I will make small position adjustments to the back legs of the chair. I want them to be rotated slightly, but the same as previously. First we need to set the origin to the geometry. Switch to the front view with the numpad 1, add a Bezier curve, and, as with the back leg of the chair, reposition all the points with G, rotate with R, and add new points by selecting 2 points and right-clicking on the curve and choosing Subdivide. When you are happy with the general shape, switch to the side view with the numpad 3, and from there move the curve to the back of the chair and start the side angles of the chair frame. The chair's back frame has the same bevel setup as the back leg of the chair. Additionally, this time change the preset to cornice molding and modify a few of its points by entering the same numbers, or you can experiment by grabbing and dragging the dots inside the graph. After making all the modifications, take another look at your frame and slightly adjust one end of the point to smooth out the angle of the curve. Now we can add the mirror modifier, and our back frame is ready. Hide the chair base and use Shift+A to add a curly curve. Change the type to third, and remove 3 points that form the larger spiral shape. Moving the curve inside edit mode will change its origin point, so switch to object mode with tab, and rotate the curve on the y-axis by 90 degrees. Next, unhide the chair base with Alt+H, and move the curve to the first visible loop cut point to the left. With the origin point at the bottom of the curve, rotate it by 36 degrees. Now we are ready to add depth and readjust the curve shape further. To scale the bottom of the curve, use the Alt+S combination. Using only the S key won't make any changes to the point. For the arms of the chair, choose crown molding and change one or more points inside the graph. While in object mode, right-click and convert the curve to a mesh. Connect vertices using the same technique. First, use the F key after selecting 4 vertices. After that, select only the 2 vertices, and keep pressing the F key until you reach the end. You can turn on X-ray mode to ensure you reach the end position the same as the starting one. To add more details and close the caps with the right topology, add 3 loop cuts. Select the middle loop cut and scale it with Alt+S. Start closing the ending of the spiral, ensuring each face is a quad. Improve the look of the model by switching to object mode, adding a subdivision surface modifier at level 2 with Ctrl+2, and right-clicking to smooth it out. Next, switch to the top view, and move the spiral on the X-axis closer to the edge of the chair base. The bottom part of this chair won't be visible, but let's close it properly, just as we did with the top ending of the spiral. To increase visibility, temporarily deactivate the subdivision modifier and enter X-ray mode. Now, switch to isolation mode using the numpad/key and close the bottom end of the spiral. Once that is done, exit isolation mode, enable the subdivision surface modifier, and mirror the spiral to the opposite side of the chair. Next, we will focus on creating the armrest. Lower the position of the spiral on the Z-axis. Enter Edit mode, and disable the subdivision modifier for better visibility. From the side view, select the vertex from which you want to extrude the armrest part. Zoom in on the selected vertex. switch to face selection, and now select the shortest path by choosing the first face on the left edge. While holding Shift, Control left-click on the face on the other part of the edge. While holding Shift, select one more line of faces just below it. Go to the side view, use the E key to extrude faces, and right-click to snap them back to the original position. Next, move the extruded part along the Y-axis, and straighten the end by scaling it on the Y-axis to 0. After straightening, extend the ending until it almost reaches the end of the chair's back frame. Additionally, add an extra loop at the end. This won't add much to the object since this part is hidden, but it's still good practice and a minor improvement. Next, we will work on the right position of the entire arm. Thanks to the origin at the bottom of the curve, we can rotate the arm easily without affecting the main spiral part of the arm. As you can see, only rotation won't fix all the issues. We also need to select all the ending vertices and scale them down so they fit properly. Experiment with scaling and rotation until you find the perfect spot for the end of the arm. You can also rotate it on the Y-axis to get the lines properly aligned. The base of the arm is now ready. Later, we will revisit it to add a few more details. To create a seat cushion, we will use our chair base. However, before that, let's add a few more loops and details to it. Currently, due to the lack of a clean topology, we are unable to add all the needed loop cuts. To address this issue, we will create a line that goes from this vertex to the vertex on the opposite side of the chair base. We will use the knife tool to achieve this. Since we have a mirror modifier, our cut is going to reach only halfway, and the other half will be mirrored for us. Proceed to create an additional loop cut on the opposite side of the base chair. Next, switch to the bottom view and make the same cuts. After that is done, we can finally create extra side loops without any issues. Create an extra loop behind the front arm and back frame, and one on the side, just next to the frame and arm. Next, select two faces and perform an inset and extrusion at the front and back of the chair base. We want the seat cushion to be placed in the middle of the created details and at the front of the chair. Select all the needed faces. Duplicate and separate them from the chair base. Before working further on the cushion, we need to apply the transforms. This is necessary because at the very beginning, we scaled the chair base inside the object mode instead of the edit mode. This affected our transforms, and if we don't apply them, we'll get unwanted results later on, for example when trying to bevel the edges of the cushion. To apply the transforms, be in object mode, select the object, and use Ctrl+A to choose all transforms. Now, let's go back to edit mode, extrude the cushion part, and use / to enter isolation mode, making it easier to select all the top and bottom edges and bevel them without any issues. Apply the subdivision modifier, smooth everything, and let's correct a few loops by sliding them or straightening them up. Lastly, add a few extra loop cuts to give a bit more shape to the cushion. To exit isolation mode, use the / key once more. Now, let's go back to the arm to add the resting arm details. Add 5 additional loops to the top part of the arm. Straighten all of them using the technique you already know and have used a few times. After straightening all the created loops, scale the second and the third created loop cuts on the x-axis. Resting your arm on all those edges would not be comfortable, so let's select them and flatten them out. Again, use the same technique, but this time scale by 0 on the z-axis. Extrude all the faces that got flattened, and lastly, flatten the line at the front and at the back before the extruded faces to create a nice smooth slope. Now, we will start making the back support of the chair. To make it easier, reuse the chair frame. Start by converting the frame to a mesh. Inside the Edit mode and Face selection, select the inside loop faces. Duplicate them with the Shift+D and after separate them by using the P key. Use / for isolation mode and apply all transforms. At the bottom of the frame, you may find a weirdly positioned face that we won't need. We will add the mirror modifier very soon, so let's delete that face only on the right side of the frame. From the front view, with vertex selection and X-ray mode enabled, remove the left side of the back support. Let's now pause for a few minutes to explain what we want to achieve, how we want to do it, and why. We want to close the frame and fill out the whole grid, but there are way too many loops. It will make our mesh way too dense and messy. One of the easiest ways to reduce the amount of loops is to use the checker deselect. I performed a few tests and I found that unselecting every fourth does a good enough job. But choosing the right settings for checker deselect was not enough. I still had to test and decide how many numbers of cuts needed to be added at the bottom of the back support. And while testing this out, I was using only even numbers. The grid fill won't work if you try to enter the odd number. I had also issues with grid fill creating messy topology. I found through testing that you should select first all the vertices with the A key, and after use the grid fill. If you select the loop while using Alt shortcut, it will always mess up the whole topology, and this is not what we want. While keeping this in mind, let's go back to where we paused and continue the work. Make sure that you are in edge mode selection. Select everything with the A key and after deselect only the side loops. Now we can perform checker deselect with the mentioned settings. During deletion, make sure that you are dissolving the edges, not removing them. Next, switch to vertex mode and delete the back loop of the vertices. Exit isolation mode to check how the frame looks from the back view. Turning on X-ray mode can help you see everything more clearly. It looks like we can get rid of the last two vertices and extend the last one a bit further down. Let's return to isolation mode and add and apply the mirror modifier. Connect the two bottom vertices, and as mentioned previously, subdivide the bottom edge 13 times. After selecting everything with the A key, use Grid Fill to fill everything with clean topology. With everything selected, extrude and scale it. Use Ctrl+I to invert the selection, and this time extrude towards the back. And we are done with the base of the back support and can start adding more details to it. We will start by adding a subdivision modifier level 3 and then make a few adjustments to the cushion shape. Next, add a few loops that will be used to create a Chesterfield pattern. Once that is done, select 3 columns of vertices. Use the Ctrl+F shortcut and choose poke faces twice. Use Ctrl+F one more time, but this time choose twist to quads. Select only 3 vertices in each column and move them on the Y-axis inside the cushion. With the same vertices still selected, use the Ctrl+B shortcut, and after that, press the V key. This will enable you to bevel only a single vertex. Lastly, extrude all the beveled vertices, and we are almost done with the back support and its pattern. To make the Chesterfield look better, let's go back to edit mode and round up the 4 main vertices of the pattern. Make sure to use the Alt+S to round them up. Using Shift together with this shortcut is optional and only adds slower movement, and in some cases, can improve precision. Now, let's improve the Chesterfield pattern even more by using the cloth simulation. If we add and run the cloth simulation now, the back support will shrink and start falling down due to gravity. To prevent this, we first need to create the pin group to specify which parts of the mesh should stay in place during the cloth simulation. And of course additionally, we should turn off the gravity to prevent falling down of this part of the mesh. Start by creating vertex groups for the desired vertices. In the Object Data Properties, create and rename the vertex group. Select all the beveled and extruded vertices, and assign them to the created vertex group. Create 2 loops on the side of the back support and assign them to the vertex group. With the subdivision modifier enabled, add the cloth simulation and choose silk as the type. Scroll down to pressure and increase it to 4. In the Shape section, select the newly created vertex group. Lower the shrinking factor to -0.009 and turn off gravity in the field weights by sliding the value from 1 to 0. Play the simulation for a few seconds until you are satisfied with the simulation results, and then press the spacebar again to pause it. Apply the subdivision modifier and cloth simulation. Cloth simulation has added more details and improved the shape, but we still need to correct strange deformations on the mesh. To do this, we will use the sculpting tools. With the back support selected, switch to the sculpting workspace. Change the sculpting brush to the smooth option, adjust the strength, and begin smoothing the deformation areas with the left mouse click. Use the outliner to hide elements of the chair that block the view of the back support. Return to the layout workspace, unhide all the hidden elements, and now let's repeat a similar process, but this time focusing on the seat cushion. Select the seat, apply the mirror modifier, and add 4 loop cuts on the side to improve the cloth simulation results. As before, we will start by creating a pin group. I want the bottom part of the cushion to be flat so that it can lay on the wooden part of the chair more effectively. That's why, in addition to the 2 edge loops, I will add the entire bottom part to the seat pin group as well. Unhide all the hidden elements, and double-check if everything was assigned properly by clicking on the Select button. The next step is to add a cloth simulation, which you already know how to do, including adjusting the input fields. Play the simulation, pause it when you are happy with the results, and apply all the modifiers. We won't be using any smoothing this time, but feel free to experiment further. However, we will be adding a different detail to it. To make the seat look more interesting, select 2 loops of faces, extrude them with the E key, and scale them inside with Alt+S. It's a very small detail, but it makes the cushion look much better. Select the chair base, add the subdivision modifier, and 1 loop at the end. Slide 2 vertices on the y-axis, roughly aligning them with the rest of the vertices. Next, select 3 back faces and extrude them upward. Repeat this process 2 more times, each time selecting 1 less face. To create a smoother, rounded shape at the top, select the edge and move it up on the Z-axis. Now, let's improve the sharpness of the edges. Create 2 loop cuts, one at the back and the second at the front. Lastly, smooth everything out, and our chair base is almost ready. Go around the chair base and add more loops to the edges to emphasize it further. Proceed with the same steps for the front elements of the leg. Add subdivision and enhance the final results by adding more sharpness. Organize all the elements properly inside the outliner by renaming them appropriately. See you in the next part, where we will take care of adding seams and unwrapping.